when I invent the shapes and forms and, cut out big alien-looking pods and spiky things and layer things that I think are, I'm making them up. My paintings become much more interesting and exciting to me to then develop.
Artist Bonnie Lalley was born and raised in Detroit before moving to northern Michigan. She is a graduate of Kendall School of Art and received her Master's of Fine Art from the University of Illinois. Lalley's work, much like nature, assembles vibrant colors arrayed with bits of paper and detritus. Her exhibition, The Circumference of a Garden, is currently showing at the Saginaw Art Museum through November 18, 2022. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us here on the Temple Arts Podcast. We are enjoying your exhibition at the Saginaw Art Museum, The Circumference of a Garden. It is just absolutely beautiful, especially in the season that we're in, as our garden outside is blooming. We have, in a way, your exhibition blooming inside as visitors come and enjoy viewing your works. I want to start off just by asking a relatively simple question. Why gardens? What is it that draws you in and inspires you when viewing gardens, and why have you made that the subject of your work?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Thor. Yes, and I will try to, easy question, I'll try to make it an easy answer. My mother was a passionate gardener, so we grew up with gardens, beautiful gardens, and we went from a postage stamp size lot in the heart of Detroit, which my parents planted up like a jungle, to 200 acres way northern Michigan, where the gardens got bigger and, and then it extended out into fields and forests. And so all of that experience, I have a deep affinity for gardens, controlled nature in the form of gardens, and wild nature, as I said, in the form of the rest of the land that we were able to roam freely on as kids. So that's my easy answer.
It's really interesting to consider the variation in your garden experience. You described having a small space to a large space, and still nature has its course in a bit of a controlled boundary way. And thinking about that in creating your pieces, where a garden has a boundary, in a way, the edges of your paper have something of a boundary. What do you find to be sort of the most challenging part of creating these works? Are in many cases quite large. You have a lot of garden to work with in a sense.
Right,
a lot of space to cultivate.
Yes, that's a great way to put it, because that is how I feel when I'm in the studio. I'm going to use that from now on, Thor. I don't make paintings; I cultivate them.
How do you sort of choose your materials and work within the bounds of the materials that you have in creating your work? The paper has an edge, and you can sort of work up to that edge. How do you decide what goes in or what goes out?
What goes in, what goes out? Most of my pieces are not pre-planned in any way. So what goes in and what goes out, I have to. Yes, I like large scale, so I lay them on the floor, and I have to just throw some paint down. Any color or ink. I make my own black walnut ink by the gallon, and I have this prime vintage 4-year-old walnut ink, 5-gallon bucket of it in the basement, and it's wonderfully non-fugitive, or in lay people's terms, stable and light fast. So It's a beautiful, soft brown color, and it's sort of transparent. So anyway, I like to begin a lot of my compositions by just brushing that down in really very calligraphic kinds of shapes and designs. And you know what that's like with your own work. Um, so just to break up the space, and then on a good day, when I don't have chatter in my head about art and what this should be and preconceived notions of it, um, things start to emerge for me. And so I don't, boundaries are I think the large scale that I work is actually a boundary issue, in that large scale is easier for me than small paintings. I hadn't thought this through before, Thor. This is a total new question. Um, so yeah, I think I keep going larger and larger because I can actually cope with the fact that I feel like I'm extending out of the boundaries and doing bigger landscape types of things. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It does. It's almost as though your gardens have more room, and as your works grow, they become in a way more realistic because gardens can have this scale. So
Yeah,
I think I
that's how I
understand that.
yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Yeah.
um,
You mentioned that there wasn't a lot of specific pre-planning for work, but I'd love to hear your comment about the way that you observe the world, even though it's not like structured in the way I'm going to put these pieces together to make this work.
mhm.
You've described in the past, as we've had conversations, how you're sort of always working, sketching, drawing, or observing, noting colors and things like that. And I think that's a very interesting thing to think about. And I'd love to hear your comments a little bit more about that piece of the work of being an artist and
Mhm.
the creation process.
There are a couple of things that I know about my processes as an artist. Okay. A lot of it, of course, is unknown, and that's the joy of being an artist, right? But the things that I know are that, yes, I do sketch and paint from life a lot, and observe everything daily, colors and textures. And but I have found that when I'm really literal, when I with a painting, oh, even just a floral still life. Okay, I want tulips and roses or this or that. If I start out really literal like that, it's a complete disaster for me. And I've trained myself to separate. Well, I've really fought literalness, if that's a word, for a long time. That doesn't work so well for me. And I find that when I invent the shapes and forms and, cut out big alien looking pods and spiky things and layer things that I think are, I'm making them up. My paintings become much more interesting and exciting to me to then develop. And then sometimes more literal, specific things will work their way into it. But I also think, as free as I'm trying to be with these shapes and sort of botanical forms, they probably exist out there somewhere in the world anyway. I'm probably
Mhm.
not, as wild as I think I can get with a form, it probably actually exists somewhere. So my work goes much better. I go deeper. I get into that zone when free myself up from any, like I said, a literal garden or plant or a spatial arrangement. Like, okay, for example, as a younger artist, I would think, oh, well, if the water is meeting here, the land has to look like this. And I can't have a horizon line, at the top of the page, and that kind of struggle. And I don't think about those things anymore. I put things where I want them to be, and put colors together that I want, and put things that look super tropical with, Midwestern shapes. And to me, it all works out just great, So did I answer that question?
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful way of describing that. Turning a little bit, most of your works have very long names. They're not like Untitled #1 or anything like that. I mean, we're dealing with long descriptive names for very complex
narratives.
Works. Narratives, almost stories within themselves.
Yes.
Can you comment a little bit on that? Maybe where that idea came from, or is there a reasoning behind having these long names that are in a way easy to remember because they're longer, and harder to remember because they're longer?
Sure. Nobody's ever asked me that before either. And Thor, I feel like you're really you've got some things under a microscope here that that are actual. I have answers to. I was thinking recently about the narrative aspect of my works, and this is something that maybe not everybody picks up on. You certainly did, but I feel like my still life is, for me, I know that when I'm working, I am thinking about people and childhood experiences. I know that experiences in nature with loved ones, friends, family, those are the things that come to the surface when I'm working, all of the memories. And for instance, I have a good friend. We were walking in the Arb at UMich, and she pointed out the turkey grass, that's the common name. I can't give you the Latin name, but it's the native prairie grasses that grow here, and the beautiful purple tops, and the stems get really purple in the fall. And so anyway, I remember this day walking with our families, actually all together, and looking at this turkey grass for the first time with new eyes, with this information. And so those come into my work. And every time I cut those out, I think about that day, and I think about my daughter and her garden when I'm painting melons and crows in a piece. So to me, they're not just a still life, they're like an assemblage of people and voices in my life. And that is really a strong directive in my creative process.
Well, it's wonderful to hear about the way that you are using those things from your memories and experiences and bringing them into, in a way, something concrete through your artwork, and so that it does tell that story. It does tell a narrative.
Thanks.
Very, very interesting. In closing here, if you had to give some encouragement to young artists or people that aspire to be artists, what kind of words of wisdom might you pass along, or a key lesson that you might have learned in your own journey in creative life?
Well, I've been asked that a couple of times. I find that really hard to answer, because I do think that there are such creative voices out there, so many young people when I was teaching that, it would just blow my mind how I could see how originally they thought, via their drawings or paintings. And art is important. And I guess I feel like you need to know in yourself how strong you have to be to choose an unconventional path. You just need, you need fortitude, and focus. And if you feel like you know that about yourself, that you have to make art above everything else, and you're determined to, there's nothing else. There's nothing else that inspires you or that you want to do. And I just feel like you have to listen to that, your voice, your inner voice, telling you what to do. And I guess if it's not like really overriding, demanding you to do this, then maybe do something tangential to the visual arts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's...
I don't want that to sound like negative either. I mean, I guess to encapsulate that, it's a tough life, right? Mm-hmm. For most artists, that's all. And you just have to be really willing to embrace that if you feel like you have something to say. And I mean, if so many of our great artists and writers and filmmakers threw in the towel too soon, we would be bereft of all this wonderful art, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. That there's a degree of patience and
patience and
clarity
strength and clarity. Yeah, you have to be strong. That's all.
Yeah. Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for sharing your work and sharing your thoughts here on the podcast today. We are thoroughly enjoying the exhibition and look forward to continuing to follow your career and the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much, Thor. It has been such a pleasure working with you and Ben Champagne on the exhibition. And you run just a beautiful museum.
Thank you for listening to the Temple Arts Podcast. Please consider subscribing to the podcast and making a donation to the arts through SaginawArtMuseum.org or TempleTheater.com. This will allow us to continue to bring enriching program to Saginaw and beyond.